Daniel knew something was wrong before Amanda even opened the door. Their East Austin porch light was on, the anniversary lanterns he had strung that morning still glowing gold, and through the frosted glass he could see two shadows instead of one. He had driven back early from Houston with flowers on the passenger seat, a bakery box balanced on his knee at every stoplight, and a silver bracelet hidden in his jacket pocket. When Amanda cracked the door, her lipstick was rushed, her smile was frightened, and the first thing she said was, "Can you be a team player and wait in the car?" Daniel actually laughed for half a second, because the sentence was so absurd it sounded like a prank from one of those overproduced internet skits. Then he noticed a second wine glass on the hallway table, a man's leather coat tossed over the banister, and a deep voice from the dining room saying, "Is he here?" Amanda stepped onto the porch and pulled the door nearly closed behind her like she was trying to hold back floodwater with one hand. "Please," she whispered, eyes darting everywhere but his face. "Just 10 minutes. He's finishing his drink. Don't make this harder than it already is." The flower slid from Daniel's numb fingers and thumped softly against the welcome mat. That little sound did more damage than shouting ever could. He looked past Amanda's shoulder and saw a pair of polished loafers beside his anniversary gift bag on the entry bench. Somebody else had put their shoes next to his future. Daniel's throat tightened, but the anger that rose in him came strangely cold, like ice water instead of fire. He didn't storm inside. He didn't punch a wall. He just stared at Amanda until she flinched, then nodded once, turned around, and walked back to his car. As he sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, Daniel remembered the first time he had met Amanda at an open MIC night near South Congress. He was bumming gently through a story about a runaway grocery cart in an H-E-B parking lot, when Amanda laughed so hard she snorted iced tea through her nose. She waved him over afterward, still red-faced, and said, "Any man who can make humiliation sound charming deserves pie." They ate pecan pie at midnight under neon signs and argued about whether Elvis was overrated. She called him honest. He called her electric. Austin felt small, bright, and designed just for them. Back then their love had the goofy confidence of people who think luck is a permanent condition. They danced barefoot in their first apartment kitchen while frozen pizza burned in the oven. They drove to San Antonio for no reason except breakfast tacos and came home with a souvenir sombrero big enough to seat a family of raccoons. Amanda once convinced Daniel that a couple's pottery class would be sensual, and they left looking like two confused archaeologists covered in wet clay. When money was tight, they shared milkshakes with 2 straws and invented ridiculous anniversary traditions involving dollar store crowns and handwritten awards for best spouse. Daniel had always admired Amanda's ambition. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with introductions, invitations, and somebody's grandmother's secret cobbler recipe. When she landed a job at Solis Public Relations downtown, Daniel toasted her with cheap Prosecco and promised he would never become the kind of husband who feared a powerful wife. Amanda kissed him and said they would be a team forever. At first, team player meant splitting chores, swapping errands, and covering for each other during hard weeks. Over time, though, the phrase changed. Amanda used it when she wanted Daniel quiet, agreeable, and conveniently absent. The anniversary surprise had taken Daniel 3 weeks to plan. He had told Amanda his Houston supplier meetings would run late, but he actually left early, picked up a favorite strawberry lemon cake from a bakery near the Heights, and spent the drive home rehearsing the speech he wanted to give. He had reserved a room at the Driscoll for the weekend, packed her overnight bag himself, and tucked old printed photos inside as a sentimental joke because Amanda loved pretending the internet had ruined romance. He had even stopped in Buc-ee's and bought the ridiculous cinnamon pecans she swore were accidentally addictive and probably illegal. Now those pecans sat unopened beside him while he watched his own front door like a stranger on a stakeout. 10 minutes passed, then 12, then 15. Amanda's silhouette moved across the curtains once, twice, then disappeared. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from her. "Please don't overreact." He stared at those 3 words until they blurred. Overreact. As if grief had a customer service version. As if betrayal should arrive neatly packaged and politely acknowledged. A black BMW was parked down the block under a pecan tree, gleaming like a smug little secret. Daniel noticed it had a vanity plate. BRNTPR. Of course it did. The front door finally opened, and a tall man in a fitted navy blazer stepped out holding a rocks glass like he was leaving a hotel lounge, not another man's marriage. "Brent, Daniel recognized him immediately from Sally's PR holiday photos, the account director with a practiced smile and expensive haircut. Brent paused on the porch, glanced toward Daniel's car, and actually adjusted his cuffs before descending the steps. Amanda followed, arms folded tightly around herself, her expression pleading and irritated at once. Daniel rolled down the window. Nobody spoke. Then Brent gave a tiny nod, as if Daniel were the valet. Daniel had never hated anyone more for being well moisturized. Amanda approached the car after Brent drove away and stood by Daniel's open window with the nervous posture of someone waiting for a weather report she already knew. "It's complicated," she said. Daniel almost admired how unoriginal Betrayal could be. He looked at her carefully, noticing details he had once loved. The freckle near her left eye, the tiny scar on her chin from a childhood by crash, the silver hoops he bought her in Santa Monica during happier years. "You asked me to wait in the car," he said quietly, "outside my own house, on our anniversary, for him to finish his drink." Amanda looked down and whispered. I panicked. Daniel did not go inside that night. He drove aimlessly through Austin until the road widened and the city lights blurred, then parked outside a 24-hour diner near Round Rock where truckers, insomniacs, and heartbreak seemed to share equal billing. He ordered coffee he did not want and pie he did not taste. At the counter, an elderly waitress named Loretta watched him stare at nothing for so long that she finally slid over a napkin and said, "Write down the dumbest sentence anybody said to you today." Daniel wrote, "Be a team player." Loretta read it, snorted, and said, "Honey, that ain't a marriage. That's unpaid internship abuse." Loretta's joke cracked something open in him, not enough to heal, but enough to breathe. Daniel laughed so suddenly he startled himself. Then he told her everything in broad strokes: anniversary, surprise, porch light, drink, car. Loretta listened like a veteran of every human disaster available in Texas. When he finished, she refilled his coffee and said, "Don't let one humiliating night turn you stupid. Sad is allowed. Destructive is expensive." That sentence became the rail he held on to. Daniel had spent years building a life, a business, and a reputation. He was not going to blow it up just to prove he could still make noise. By sunrise, sadness had matured into clarity. Daniel remembered the post-nuptial agreement his grandmother had insisted on after helping him renovate the old family bakery building on East Cesar Chavez. Amanda had rolled her eyes at the time, called Grandma June a Southern spy in orthopedic shoes, and signed anyway. The agreement protected inherited property, Daniel controlling interest in his business ventures, and outlined severe financial penalties for infidelity or misuse of shared business funds. Daniel had once thought it old-fashioned and vaguely dramatic. Sitting in the diner booth with sticky syrup on the table and betrayal in his chest, he suddenly thought Grandma June might deserve a statue. By noon, he was in Dallas meeting his cousin Tasha, a divorce attorney with the calm voice of a kindergarten teacher and the strategic mind of a chess computer. Tasha did not offer revenge fantasies or sympathetic gasps. She asked for timelines, documents, ownership records, and account access. Daniel gave her everything. Then his accountant friend Leo joined them with a laptop and a face that suggested he already suspected bad news. Within an hour they found unusual charges: private dinners, hotel bookings in Scottsdale and Napa, designer purchases, and reimbursements labeled client hospitality charged against a side brand Daniel had funded for Amanda. The affair was ugly. The finances were worse. Amanda had been pitching that side brand as a couple's lifestyle company called Half Moon House, built around curated dinners, home entertaining, and modern relationship storytelling. Daniel had written half the copy, designed the website, and funded the launch because he thought he was building their future. Leo discovered Amanda had been using Daniel's investor contacts in the bakery kitchen as leverage in private meetings, presenting herself as majority decision-maker. Brent had been helping her shop the concept around town. Daniel leaned back in his chair and felt the humiliation deepen into something cleaner and harder. She had not only broken his heart, she had tried to rewrite his work. For the next 2 weeks, Daniel became so composed it frightened even him. He moved into a furnished loft near downtown Austin, said almost nothing to Amanda except through Tasha, and answered her emotional texts with practical questions about records and logistics. Amanda swung between apology and annoyance. One minute she was sobbing that Brent had complicated her judgment. The next she was offended Daniel seemed cold. Meanwhile, Daniel quietly secured the bakery building, restricted financial access, notified investors of governance changes, and scheduled an independent review of Half Moon House. When Uncle Ray heard all this, he slapped Daniel's shoulder and said, "Son, calm men are terrifying. Keep going." Amanda, clueless to the scale of the storm gathering beneath her expensive boots, insisted their previously planned anniversary rooftop event at the Driscolls should still happen. She framed it as a brand celebration, a couple's content launch, and a public reset. "People are expecting something," she texted. Daniel almost admired the nerve. Solis' PR clients, Austin lifestyle bloggers, local investors, and friends had already been invited. Brent, according to the guest list, would be there as strategic advisor. Tasha told Daniel he was under no obligation to attend. Instead, Daniel smiled for the first time in days and said, "No, let's definitely give them something they weren't expecting." The plan he built was not violent, but it was ruthless in the way truth can be when it arrives with receipts. Tasha drafted the separation filing. Leo prepared a clean summary of misused funds. Daniel's business manager finalized documents, removing Amanda from any operational authority she had falsely implied. The venue contract, paid through Daniel's company, was amended so he controlled the presentation schedule. Uncle Ray somehow found a jazz trio with perfect comic timing. Loretta from the diner agreed to cater miniature pies for dessert after Daniel told her she was now part of a civilized demolition. She grinned and said, "I always wanted a tuxedo-level front row seat." To keep Amanda from suspecting anything, Daniel played his role with painful precision. He replied politely. He approved harmless decor choices. He even met her for coffee at a place near Zilka Park where she cried into a paper napkin and said she still loved him in a complicated way. Daniel nearly laughed at the phrase. Love, in Amanda's vocabulary, had become a word she used when consequences approached. He did not yell. He simply asked whether she was still planning to toast the power of partnership at the event. Amanda nodded carefully, studying him for weakness. Daniel smiled and said, "Then let's make sure the truth is represented." The night of the event arrived warm and clear, with Austin's skyline glowing behind the rooftop like a promise nobody had earned. Amanda wore emerald silk in the confidence of someone who thought she had survived the worst part. Brent arrived in a tan suit, so aggressive it seemed personally insulting. Influencers fluttered around ring lights. Investors held cocktails and complimented the floral installations. A giant screen looped photo from Daniel and Amanda's life, road trips, beach walks in Santa Monica, goofy Christmas sweaters, flour on their noses in the bakery kitchen. The crowd cooed on cue. Daniel stood near the stage, perfectly dressed, perfectly calm, and utterly done being underestimated. Amanda opened the evening with a polished speech about resilience, reinvention, and the beauty of choosing each other every day. Daniel watched several guests dab at their eyes. It was almost impressive. Then she invited him up to share a few words about love, loyalty, and the next chapter. The irony nearly floated visible above the rooftop. Daniel took the microphone, thanked everyone for coming, and began with a story about the first pie he ever shared with Amanda after that open MIC night years ago. He spoke warmly, lovingly even, and for 3 minutes the whole crowd leaned in, expecting tears, forgiveness, or maybe a public vow renewal. Instead, Daniel clicked the remote in his hand, and the slideshow changed. The happy couple photos vanished. On screen appeared a clean title slide, Team Player. There were a few confused laughs, including Brent's. Daniel let the silence stretch. 2 weeks ago, he said, "I came home early to surprise my wife for our anniversary. She asked me to be a team player and wait in the car while another man finished his drink in my house." The air left the room in one collective, shocked inhale. Amanda's face drained to chalk. Brent's confident posture collapsed into the exact shape of regret. Daniel did not rant. He did something far more devastating. He presented facts. The screen moved to timelines, expense summaries, ownership charts, and legal notices, each one simple enough that nobody could pretend confusion. He explained that Half Moon House had been built on misrepresentation, misuse of funds, and false claims of authority. He clarified that Amanda was no longer affiliated with his businesses, no longer authorized to use a bakery property, and no longer entitled to portray herself as co-owner of inherited asset protected by signed agreements. The room grew painfully quiet except for the clink of someone setting down a champagne flute too hard. Amanda stepped toward him, whispering fiercely, "Don't do this here." Daniel looked at her with a steadiness that made several people turn away. "You did it there," he replied, "in my house." Then he continued. He announced that effective immediately, the launch of Half Moon House was cancelled, investor agreements were withdrawn, and the space Amanda had been using as a studio would be reproposed. In its place, Daniel was launching Front Porch Table, a culinary storytelling brand rooted in honesty, hosted from the family bakery, would proceed supporting a scholarship fund for local hospitality students. Applause did not start immediately. When it did, it came from the investors first. Brent finally tried to speak, which would have been more impressive if his microphone had not remained off for 3 full seconds while he flapped through indignation like a man arguing with weather. When the audio came on, he muttered something about personal matters being weaponized. Uncle Ray, stationed by the jazz trio with a plate of sliders, said just loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, "Buddy, if you don't want personal matters in public, don't finish your drink on another man's anniversary." A laugh broke across the rooftop. Then another. The jazz trio, perhaps sensing destiny, drifted into a jaunty breakup rhythm. Amanda tried tears next. Real tears, too, or real enough that Daniel briefly remembered how often he used to hate seeing her cry. But pity is weaker once respect is gone. She pleaded that she had made mistakes, that Daniel was humiliating her, that nobody knew the whole story. Daniel nodded and said, "That's true. They only know enough." Then Tasha approached with an envelope and handed it to Amanda in front of everyone. Separation papers, notices regarding property access, financial demands, legal, precise, unavoidable. Loretta, circulating with tiny pies, paused by Amanda at that exact moment and said, not unkindly, "Sugar helps, but it won't fix this one." The fallout was swift and merciless in the way consequences often are for people who mistake charm for immunity. Solis PR placed Amanda on leave pending review of expense practices and conflict disclosures. Investors distanced themselves from Brent, who discovered that strategic advisor sounds less glamorous when attached to scandal and weak judgment. The lifestyle bloggers who had come expecting romance posted about accountability instead. The story traveled through Austin's social circles with a speed reserved for rooftop disasters and rich people's embarrassment. Daniel did not need to smear anyone. Amanda and Brent had already done the hard work. He had merely turned on the lights. A month later, the old bakery smelled like cardamom, brown sugar, and second chances. Daniel reopened it under the Front Porch Table name with cooking classes, community dinners, and an absurdly popular Thursday comedy night honoring the open MIC where his love story had once begun. Uncle Ray handled event hosting like a retired pirate with a microphone. Loretta became a local celebrity after customers discovered her buttermilk pie could repair moods and possibly minor plumbing issues. The funniest menu item was a mocktail called Team Player, served only in the waiting area. Daniel resisted that joke for 3 weeks, then gave in because healing sometimes wears a grin. Daniel did not become bitter, though he came close enough to smell it. Instead, he became selective. He learned to respect silence, paperwork, boundaries, and the wisdom of old women in orthopedic shoes. He also learned that humiliation can either shrink you or sharpen you, depending on whether you confuse revenge with self-destruction. Months later, after a charity dinner at the bakery, he walked Loretta to her car and found himself laughing at one of her insults so hard he had to lean against the fender. "Careful," she said. "That's how all the trouble starts." For once, Daniel chose to let life unfold slowly. The moral Daniel finally wrote on a napkin and pinned inside the bakery office was simple. Betrayal does not make you powerful, and revenge is not strongest when it is cruelest. The strongest answer to disrespect is to protect yourself, tell the truth, and build something better where the damage happened. Amanda had asked Daniel to be a team player, assuming kindness meant weakness and patience meant permission. She was wrong on both counts. Daniel lost a marriage, but he kept his dignity, his work, and his name. In the end, the worst thing he did was let the truth arrive on time, fully dressed, and undeniable. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.